both 1 and 2. Go ahead and mark.
After Eden docuseries, The Dragonfly Home, Whitney, take 1.
Okay, let it settle. Everybody get settled.
Okay, Whitney,
You can just take her.
although it's weird, not on camera, but just look at me and talk. We'll
Okay.
have a nice conversation. Can you just start by telling me your name, your organization, and what you guys do?
Yeah, my name, I should give it a break. Okay.
So,
My name is Whitney Anderson, and I'm the executive director and one of the co-founders of the Dragonfly Home. And the Dragonfly Home is Oklahoma's only state-certified provider where we run a crisis center for survivors of sex and labor trafficking. And at Dragonfly, survivors of this crime receive really all the help that they need, that they request. And so we work to meet every single need. And that can be anything from therapy, emergency relocation, case management, advocacy, and really the chance, the opportunity to chart for themselves a new path, a different path from the ones that they were on.
good, stand by there.
Yeah.
Just
What do
to
you want?
mention, her dress looks green, but it's blue on there. Is
Where?
that correct?
No, your angle is.
No. Is that my angle?
Yeah, no,
It
it's
does,
just
it
an
does look a
observation.
little bit.
It's got the green, it's okay, I can't change the dress color, but, all right, here we go.
No pressure. Yeah, I do have different clothing, so,
That's good.
okay.
How did you get involved in trafficking, rescuing victims, rehabilitation, what you guys do? What was that progression?
So I actually never thought that I would be in this field. It was certainly not in my plans. I was actually working in the corporate world, corporate business world, living comfortably and kind of just, cutting my own path. And I decided to get my master's in business. And one of my professors had me research supply chain transparency and outsourcing. And so when I was doing this research, I saw this whole new world that I just didn't know about. I learned about labor trafficking, actually in the country of Honduras. And I knew at that moment that that assignment literally changed my life. And I knew that I had to do something about it. And so I did more research, as I do, and I actually found an organization that was working in a country called Lesotho. And I did a mission trip in Lesotho and worked with sex and labor trafficking victims there. And when we were working with them, I went with my husband, we saw that, we knew that the people that we met, that the people that we were working with had been through hell. But what I saw, even though we spoke totally different languages, I saw the joy and the possibility that they saw in themselves for a different future. And so I'm moving forward, and I start volunteering for an organization full-time. I end up leaving my job in corporate business America and start working with survivors of sex and labor trafficking. In 2016, my co-founders and I actually founded the Dragonfly Home because we saw that there were so many gaps in Oklahoma. There were so many needs that needed to be filled, and we really believe that we could do a very good job filling that gap.
Are you, first of all, on this one, I'm going to jump around a little bit because there's two. Are you receiving any support, or do you see any support from State Department, Federal Department? Is this something that you feel is on their radar?
I think at varying departments, perhaps. I know that the Dragonfly Home receives a Victims of Crime grant, and that really helps us to provide the critically needed services that we provide for survivors. But I think overall, everybody's still catching up. It's like the recognition that this crime happens here in America happens so late, and so we're catching up. There's this learning curve that's happening. So I can say that, this is hard work. I have to look at the encouraging things. So I see the steps that are being taken, but we have a long ways to go.
But what are some of the biggest challenges you personally, but definitely also through Dragonfly, what you guys have faced, maybe what you're facing right now?
Yeah, so organizationally, I would say that, and I have my master's in business, so I'm always thinking about things from a marketing angle or a business angle. I think that we're an organization that provides these life-saving, life-changing services, but people have to realize first that the crime is happening in their neighborhoods. Like, it's actually impacting Oklahomans. For them to see the need to support the organization. So I feel like we're always working to educate individuals on what trafficking really looks like in the United States, what they can do about it, and how they can get involved with the Dragonfly Home. And then I also see, because we've been in this for years, and so we've seen over the years, as awareness is raised of the crime of trafficking, that means we get more and more phone calls to our 24-hour hotline. And more phone calls means we need to provide more and more services. So if I'm speaking honestly here, the survivors that we serve, they need everything. They need everything, and that costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of resources. And so I think most anti-human trafficking organizations would say they need to expand their services. They need to meet the needs of more and more survivors every single year, and we're in that same position.
So recently, I was at a conference at a university where there was a professor that was saying that the problem is inflated, it's not real, it's a foreign problem, there aren't, she quoted a line of there's only 144 traffic victims in the nation, in the United States. Correct some of these mistakes for us.
Yeah, well, first of all, one is too many, so it's a real problem here. But we see, again, we started really working in Oklahoma, pioneering the work around 2012. And so honestly, I could say that we were getting like 1 or 2 phone calls a month to the hotline. And now we get, I think last month we got 400 calls to our 24-hour human trafficking hotline. We work with sex and labor trafficking survivors every single day, children and adults who've been exploited. And to me, we have a major problem here in the United States. We just weren't calling it what it was. So the crime of trafficking certainly isn't new. It's been happening forever. But because we have this new label, I think more and more people are recognizing it for what it is. So if that was, we were saying child prostitution, we were saying child abuse, we were saying domestic violence. And so what I see every single day, training frontline professionals and working in the community, once people know what it is, what it looks like, they call us. We get referrals every single time we do a presentation. So I think it's actually a matter of recognizing the crime for what it is.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the Relief and Restoration Center? What is a day? What does that look like? What are the services and what's the current status?
Yeah. So the Dragonfly Home operates the Human Trafficking Relief and Restoration Center. And so it's this innovative model where I think a lot of people immediately think that the need of every single trafficking survivor is the same. And that's not the case at all. So what we were seeing in Oklahoma is that one, labor trafficking survivors are not being served well. Male survivors, survivors of different genders were not being served well. Minors were not necessarily being served well. And so we saw this crisis center, which provides non-residential services, as really a solution to be able to meet not only the crisis needs of survivors, so that can be emergency relocation away from a dangerous trafficker. That can be crisis intervention, receiving a referral from law enforcement at 3 a.m. No day is the same, by the way, at the Relief and Restoration Center. But we also get to meet them as they chart their own path, as they carve out their own life. Because in our experience, so many of the people we serve, they've actually been victimized in so many different ways throughout their lives, and they have a lot of needs that need to be met. And so that can be trauma-focused therapy. That can be case management, plugging them into the services they need, like medical needs, gynecological needs, dental needs. I mean, seriously, everything. Immigration assistance, help with just liaising with attorneys and law enforcement, court advocacy when they're trying to testify against a perpetrator, sitting face-to-face with them in court. So we really work to provide every single need that somebody has when they come to us.
I want to drill down a little bit on, this is not on my question list, but I want to drill down on this a little bit. You're in Oklahoma, and you're telling me you see the demand for immigration support. Talk to me about that a little bit. Are you seeing girls from other countries being sold for sex, being exploited, coerced in the United States?
So we see a wide range of individuals. I would say that the majority of the people that we serve who need immigration assistance are labor trafficking survivors who are here. Oftentimes now, it's not the border wall that we need. It's the they're on these temporary visas or visas that are tied to their employers. And the employers are using force, fraud, and coercion. And the people that we serve are working in these deplorable conditions, exhausting hours, and they're being abused. It's literal slave labor. So I would say that's the majority of the people that we work with that need immigration assistance. But we have worked with young ladies who they find themselves here, and because there are people who are wanting to exploit, not knowing the language, not knowing the culture, not knowing the laws, that people absolutely abuse them. And they need help, and they've been victimized, and they have rights in the United States, and they deserve help accessing that assistance.
Talking about abuse, sex trafficking, and maybe draw a line between there's physical abuse, other than just sexually violating a girl, but there's actual physical abuse.
Absolutely. So every single case is different, but what we've seen is this just lethal level of physical abuse. So oftentimes there's a tool in Oklahoma, it's called the lethality assessment. And so that's something that we can use when domestic violence co-occurs with a sex trafficking situation. And so some of the questions are, were you strangled? And the survivor will answer, yes. How many times was I strangled per day, right? Which is extremely lethal. Did your abuser have access to a weapon? Yes, he shoved it down my throat every single day to make sure that I performed the sex acts that he wanted me to perform. Concussions, traumatic brain injury, the effects of strangulation. This is severe. This is severe. And one of the more noticeable things that I think a lot of people could see is the need for dental assistance. There is no reason why we should be seeing so many young women who need full sets of teeth because of that physical abuse that they've endured. So I would say every single day is, am I going to survive? What is going to set off this trafficker? What is he going to do to me today? And it's living in that climate of fear that it's not just the physical abuse, the psychological abuse that just affects your body in so many different ways.
You're dealing with a lot of survivors, victims who become survivors. Talk to me a little bit about the mountain to climb out of emotional trauma.
Yes. So the reason why we do what we do is because of the people that we serve. I didn't know necessarily what I was getting into when I got into this field, but what I saw were children and adults who'd been through the worst things imaginable. They'd been through things throughout their entire lives, so not just trafficking, but also child sexual abuse, incest, physical abuse, sexual assault, you name it. So they've been through all of these different hard things in their lives, and trafficking is a part of that as well. And so one, you just stand with them and you look in awe because they're still standing and they're alive and they made it. And so I think that they're the most resilient, strong people that I've ever met in my life. With that, when they are referred to the Dragonfly Home, that's the start, right? And so I think so many people say, why would somebody go back to a trafficking situation? And to us, we understand because so often the abuse is part of their comfort zone. So I think it's extremely brave to come to people, strangers, for help when every single person in your life has burnt you or abused you. So they come to us and they let us know what they want to do with their lives. They set goals for themselves. And so we're just there helping to facilitate the services and walk alongside them because the real work is done by the survivor. Every single day, they have to make the hard decision to truck forward. And some of the things that they have to overcome are dealing with the hard things that happen to them, right? Maybe having to overcome substance abuse issues that maybe they used to cope with what they had to do. They have to deal with the fact that so many don't have healthy family. Maybe they don't understand healthy boundaries or how people should treat them. A lot of times they have to get caught back up in school because they were trafficked when they were 12 years old or 13 years old. And so they're learning all of these things. They're realizing that so often it's somebody that was supposed to protect them that did this to them. They're reconciling all this. And then they might have charges as well, criminal charges. There might be developmental delays. There might be mental health issues, medical issues. So they're overcoming all of these things. And again, every single person is so different, but they're overcoming so much. And I think every single day, it's hard. And so we're thankful just to be a part of that with them.
For you, are you exposed to, are you providing services to minors?
Yes. So the Dragonfly Home works with minor and adult survivors of sex and labor trafficking. So for survivors who are minors, we offer non-residential services again. And so often minors who come to us, their main needs, I would say, would be therapy. They need case management, help with school, help understanding how to build healthy friendships and relationships. They have to understand that what happened to them wasn't their fault. So if they're blaming themselves, then we work with them on understanding that that's the trafficker who did whatever to you. And then I think another part that a lot of people don't recognize, walking alongside, if the parents weren't the traffickers, we've worked on situations where a young girl is sold by her mother, and now she's in her father's care. And she has to go to court and she has to testify against her trafficker and against her mother. And the dad has to hear everything that happened to her, right? And the dad is asking, what happened to my little girl? When will I get my little girl back? And he's not going to get his little girl back because she's been through a lot, because she's had these adult experiences. Right? But so we're walking with the family and giving them support as well, so that they can understand the trauma related to being exploited as a young woman.
If you can, give me an average age in youth and then maybe a youngest case.
Yeah. So we serve at the Dragonfly Home, we've served 15 years old and up generally. So I don't know if that's any kind of indication, but we certainly have a lot of individuals who are referred to us at 12, 13, 14 years old as well. I know that I worked with one young lady, and she made just a major impact on my life. I actually met her when she was about 22 years old, but in reading her paperwork and tracing all that she had been through, we actually saw that her mother began exploiting her when she was just a few months old. So I think that was a case that especially impacted me, that there are people out there that are driving the demand. And those are the people that we get to work with that have survived all of this. So that's what I would say about the youth that we serve.
When do these calls mainly appear? When your hotline gets phone calls, what time of day? Is there a peak hour? Is there a time that's more prevalent than others?
So I haven't seen any real patterns on our hotline. It happens all the time. Oftentimes we see, traffickers, they don't operate on a 9-to-5 schedule, so we get them at all times of day and night. But we have certainly seen more calls on our hotline on holidays and during cold weather as well. And I think that for the survivors that we serve, certain holidays that so many of us find joy in, they are actually triggers for other people. So many of the young women we've served at Dragonfly, they never had a Thanksgiving. Like they never had any joy in celebrating a meal with family because that wasn't their story. That wasn't their normal. So we get calls on Thanksgiving and Valentine's Day and Christmas and New Year's. When everybody else is celebrating, survivors call us because they need the emotional support.
You're looking to open a shelter this year.
Yes.
How's that going? What do you need there? What are some of the challenges you're facing?
Yes, so we absolutely want to open a shelter, and the shelter will be for women and their children. And so we are currently raising money for that shelter. I wish that we would have already had the shelter by now. So we're raising money to purchase a home and property to be able to provide that 24-hour residential care, essentially adding a layer of care that we already provide to survivors. And so we're about a third of the way to our property goal, and we need people to step up. I mean, we need people to support the work because the reality is lives are lost. Lives are seriously lost when we can't provide a safe place for individuals in our state. We have people who call every day saying, "Is it open yet? Is it open yet?" And I hate to tell them it's not open yet.
In Oklahoma, do you feel there's adequate laws, and I know laws have changed a lot, but more importantly, the laws that do exist, are they being enforced, particularly against buyers, the demand?
So laws do exist against buyers, and I would say that we in Oklahoma need a whole reframing of how we see the crime of trafficking, of prostitution, of all of it. So I don't think that buyers are being held accountable at all. I think it's a slap on the wrist for people who partake in this crime, who drive this demand, and we have to do better. We have to see this crime for what it is. And so I think that we have a long ways to go in our state in seeing what feeds human trafficking. And so we have to say no to sex purchasers, and we're not saying no. We're not saying no right now. We're saying it's okay.
Is pornography part of the problem, in your opinion?
I would say that it is. And speaking as an advocate, I would say that as pornography becomes more and more violent, we see the effects of that on the people that we serve. And so that could be especially violent. It's already violent. It's already rape, it's already violent. But I would say especially violent rape and strangulation and things that no human should have to do, that they're having to satisfy the fetishes of sex purchasers because of pornography. So hot.
I say the term sex work. Just share with me what comes to mind. What's your opinion about that term? Because it's getting a lot of attention and it's almost being used as, in my opinion, a desensitizing tool.
Yeah, so I'll share a few thoughts. It's been our experience that traffickers often use a method of manipulating a young girl to empower her, to embrace her sexuality, and to use it as a tool and that they're in charge, when in reality it's a situation of child pornography or sex trafficking. And it's also been my experience that most people we serve, whether they identify as being in sex work or they identify as being a trafficking survivor, that there's been a lot of hardship in their past, that there's been a lot of abuse. So often there was no actual choice, right? They're partaking in this work and there was no actual choice. They had to do what they had to do, right? And then further we see individuals, I've never been referred someone who's in the field of sex work or prostitution that hasn't been trafficked at some point in time. And so we recognize that sometimes trafficking survivors go in and out of trafficking situations. One young woman we worked with, she was in a very dangerous trafficking situation. She managed to get out, move into her own home, and she lost her home in a tornado. And she went back to what she knew, and that was sex work. She was working for herself independently, And so she set up this date, and it ended up being a violent gang rape, and they forced her onto heroin in just a very violent situation. And then she went back into a trafficking situation just because she felt like that trafficker would give her some level of protection. And that's not necessarily the case. It's like the trafficker gave her protection because she's a product to him, because he doesn't want her to get robbed because he wants that money, right? But so that's what we see. It's so complex. So sex work, I would say complex.
Who makes the money? Because there's a misperception that the girl who's giving the service, or the boy in some cases,
Yeah.
financially hugely benefits.
Right, and that's not true. So the girls and boys that we serve, they come to us again with nothing, right? With just the clothes on their back, with no financial resources, with nothing. And so maybe they were sold the dream that the car would be theirs, or the jewelry would be theirs, or the handbag would be theirs, but they come to us with nothing. And so the myth that individuals actually make money doing this is not true. And it costs service providers a lot of money to meet the needs that they don't have. They don't have anything. And so I would say that a lot of people believe that. It's just not true.
Yeah, I'm gonna cut here, let's cut, okay? You're gonna come back.
Okay.
That's great.
Oh, thanks.
It's-